All right. And we are coming in live now. Hopefully, you guys can hear us.
Hello. How are
Here we
you?
go.
I
You
hear
might have
you.
to bring your mic a little closer, but
Yeah, I can do that. I can get this.
all right. And here we are. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe from Voltage Control Lab. Behind me is Victor from Voltage Control Lab.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
All right. Hopefully, everything is working properly. Let us know if you have any issues with the stream, with the audio, with uh,
The
whatever.
cats. The cats.
We'll see what we get. Yeah, with if you have any problem with cats, don't ever talk to me or my son again. But so here we are. This is the Voltage Control Lab first stream, first official proper stream. Uh, we are covering Magenta Studio today, the Google Max for Live suite for machine learning based pattern manipulation and creation. Um, we'll get into that in a little bit. Just wanted to give a little bit of a update on news and uh, some synth announcements. If you guys have any uh, new product announcements, module or software based hardware or software based product announcements, let us know in the comments. We'll take a look at them. Give us a link or two or something like that if you have them. But a few big things happened this week, I suppose. One, of course, is the Behringer Eurorack Go case announcement, which has thoroughly freaked out the synth world, and we still don't know the price yet. Based on the specs, it looks quite robust, but we'll see what the cost is, and I think the general take from most of the modular establishment is maybe audio's too full or too low. Let's try bringing this up a little bit. Let me know if it's getting better.
Yeah, I think I heard it a little better right there.
That's a little bit better. So, and we'll keep tweaking this a little bit. Let us know if that's a little bit better. So, yeah, Behringer Go case, 3 amps, I think it said, on the plus minus 12 volt rails for power, the plus 5 volt rail as well for your digital modules. Pretty robust sounding thing. If it's cheap, it's going to result in more module sales, certainly. But we can go to the Eurorack Facebook forum or Facebook group, Eurorack Synthesizers Facebook group, the Muff Wigglers Facebook group. I'm sure if you go on some of the common synth forums online as well, you're going to find a absolute bloodbath of opinions. So, yeah, looks like an interesting thing. Certainly has some features that are characteristic of other things we've seen in the past, but I'm going to leave it at that, and you guys can take a look. What other stuff did we see this past week? Let's see. We had. Let's take a look at the.
Well, one thing I've been noticing in a lot of forums, people have been asking how to capture their Euro rack or modular performance, and kind of noticed that Reaper 6 is out. And for $60, that's like, that DAW's so top.
That's a steal,
Yeah.
and especially if you're trying to keep most of the process um, based in the hardware world and just use the computer for recording, for multi-tracking, or even just real-time recording. Reaper also has a pretty robust suite of mixing and mastering tools. Seems to be the commonly used tool for anybody who's doing
Serious mastering.
mastering in the box. So Yeah, $60 is a real steal there, and really increasingly continuing to grow that DAW. Really interesting stuff with Reaper. The let's see what else we saw. Um, Muffin Zeef, our friends over at Muffin Zeef, our friends, those freaks. They created a limited edition panel for 3 of their GMO modules. Each one of these sort of segments representing a different firmware that you can install for the GMO. I can't speak highly enough about the GMO. It's like a dirty lo-fi sampler with some granular style controls. Especially if we start modulating these things, specimen is effectively the sample. We have speed of the sample, the head and the tail are the start and end points, and we have a looping switch. So we can do micro looping, and then especially if we start modulating using some randomization, things like this, we can do quite a bit of granular style, lo-fi granular style manipulation of the sample material. And on top of that, it's got a great collection of libraries. It's open source, so you can go in and edit the firmware yourself, create your own firmware, create your own sample libraries. But they've got a ton of sample libraries in the GitHub repository where they've got all of their code, including artist-created libraries like Basic did a library. There's a Indian percussion library, marimba libraries, a ton of different sample libraries that are already built, and they're nice and lo-fi. It's, I think, 14-bit, 32 kilohertz, something lo-fi in the range of the MPC. So really cool device, and if you're into lo-fi style music, it's the type of thing that you can really get some nice color and funkiness out of it. Ross has also introduced a couple of other modules under this bad idea concept that he's been developing lately, farting out. I'm not sure how Ross would call it, but I'm sure he would think of some hilarious commentary. We'll have him on at some point in the near future, hopefully. This is it. It's the bad idea 1-800-call-your-mom DIY. I think this will come in a completed module as well, but I think we just send in triggers or gates to these inputs, and it makes phone tones. It's like dialing a phone. So make of that what you will. He's made some really weird ass modules in the past, but they are so idiosyncratic and weird and cool that I can't really say anything bad about them. They're all amazing.
Had you heard about this new modular called the Ion Modular 3P? And it's a recreation of the Moog Modular 3P and Model 15 of the Eurorack.
How do you spell that?
It's AION Modular 3P.
Let's bring it up here. Oops. Let's see. And let's take a look here. Is this it? 3P and Eurorack modules. 4-channel mixer. Which one is it?
So it's basically they're recreating the Moog Modular 3P and Model 15 and Eurorack modular formats.
Oh wow, like the whole range of modules.
It even has that case down there at the below.
That's pretty cool.
Kind of looking old school.
Wow. Keeping it in a Moog modular format, but in a smaller Eurorack size and power consumption. Very interesting. I mean, I'd love to hear these.
Yeah, that one looks so nice.
They look great. And yeah, I've never heard of this company before, but I'm very, very curious now. Yeah, that's really cool. Pittsburgh Modular announced a new delay module this week. They had like one small, I think I'm not sure if it's analog or digital delay last week, and then this week they announced like a new like bucket brigade delay or something like that. Let's see if we can find that. Here it is. So Pittsburgh Modular, I think for years has been one of the companies that's helped to introduce new users to Eurorack and to the modular hardware format. Let's see. Okay, so this is the one they announced last week, this Lifeforms analog delay unit. And then this week they had another one. Let's see. I don't see it in here, though. It was like the next step up from this thing. Let's find it. When in doubt, go to Instagram, especially for the new stuff. Let's see. Pittsburgh Modular, of course, is from Pittsburgh. Yeah, of course, I don't see it here either. All right, well.
You looking for the analog delay unit?
Well, that's the small one. Maybe I'm crazy and they just had 4 of them in a row. I swear there was something more to it though. I think they teased some other unit, but now I don't see it. Might have been in the like Instagram stories or something like that. Maybe that's why I don't see it. But you know, so it goes.
Stuff,
So
yeah.
let's see. Any new ideas here? Let's see. You guys streaming live from a U-Haul truck? Yes, actually, we are in the back of a U-Haul truck. We're actually on our way to Vegas.
We live in a U-Haul truck,
Maybe.
so it's cheaper than the rent these days.
Yeah, yeah.
So we built it out.
A lot easier to just rent a truck, park it on the street.
Yep.
So,
got 3 cats in it too. It's really cool.
Let's see. We should have another amp of current though. Maxes out with the current Monster IRA line. Referring to the IRA modular series from Roland. Of course, long known for their extreme power consumption. I have one, the Scooper, but I do not use and never have used the Eurorack power supply to power it. I keep it in a separate one. 2 dB of gain on the output. 2 dB up. I'm gonna try that out. Let's see. Hopefully that fixes it. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback, guys. I appreciate this. So, shall we get into Magenta? Any new ideas? Any news that you guys have heard from the chat room? Tiny bit low. Okay, hopefully it's a little bit better now. And we can go louder if you need to. So, yeah. I think that, with something like the IRA modules, anytime you've got like a separate power supply for a modular device, I tend to shy away from using the Eurorack power just to leave room for whatever other devices I want to power. Now, sometimes that means I have to leave, if we're using a closed back case, that might mean we have to leave a little bit of extra room to run that cable through the back. And it might also mean, if we're that focused on that idea, that we have to like take that module out to actually unplug it from its own power supply. So this is, one of those things. It's just like, depends on how you want to use this stuff, I guess. What's up, Marco? Thanks for joining us. Okay, so I think if there isn't anything else, and maybe we'll keep our eye on the chat room here and see what you guys have to say in terms of news, of course, and questions, concerns, complaints. You know, if you've got rants and raves that you want to go on, then we will selectively share those too. But I think we'll maybe move on to doing some Magenta stuff. What do you think about that, Victor?
I like that. I was also looking at some other AI software right now as we talk.
Yeah, so let's maybe use that as a jumping off point because we're getting into discussion of machine learning software here, and what kind of spurred this discussion, aside from just the general interest in using Magenta and the some of the projects that have come out of that system. 2 weeks ago now, Amazon, during their Intersect Fest, announced that they were going to release this Amazon AWS Deep Composer device, which is effectively a glorified MIDI controller, it seems, that is trained based on, seemingly based on some sort of machine learning algorithms that Amazon has developed, that makes use supposedly of the AWS system and seems to be only trained on 4 different types of music, 4 different styles of music. It was like pop, rock, jazz, and classical, or something like this. And so I would just suggest you guys go over to Create Digital Music, cdm.link. If you're not already, that's a website that's worth checking out on a daily basis. Their Synthtopia, I could name a few more, but Create Digital Music did a thorough takedown of the Deep Composer, and I'll let you guys read that. Peter has a pretty on-point analysis of the device and whether it's all that Amazon kind of claims it to be. So I'm not going to go too much deeper into that, as much other than to say I will remain open-minded in hopes that it turns into something interesting, but right now it looks kind of janky. That said, it's kind of led to this discussion that we're going to have today, which is about some tools that are not janky, that are, I think, very useful and, if not inspirational, in the music making process. And we'll just qualify this by saying that the music making process is a complicated one, and if you have a particular dislike for the idea of using some sort of generated or computer assisted content, then that's a totally cool and understandable decision as an artist, and you can have that perspective. But it's A, good to know the tools that are available to us, and B, it doesn't have to be something that is some cold, sterile, generated thing. It can be something that we use as simply an input source, an information source that will still be filtered through us, will still receive, even in the slightest cases, quite a bit of human interaction. And I think it's just another form of collaborative material, and it just it can jive up the process a little bit. So let's take a look at some of this stuff and move over to Amazon, or not Amazon,
Magenta.
Ableton. Okay, so here we are, and maybe before I do this, let me.
Soon enough, it'll be Ableton.
I'm just down here.
Amazon Ableton Live.
Oh, let's hope not. Good grief.
That's when we know it wrong.
Let's hope not. All right, here we go. I set up a project in advance here so that I have a few pieces of material to work with, but we're going to go through bit by bit this suite. Now, if you go to the website, let's bring this back up here. Okay, there it is. Boom. So magenta.tensorflow.org is the open source project website. I would suggest reading through this site because it's got a little bit of information about how all of these things interact together. When Magenta and the source code was created, a number of projects came out of it, but it's really due to the inclusion of certain JavaScripting backend functions in Max 8 that has enabled us to run Magenta Studio inside of Max for Live. So the integration with Ableton is something that has really only come about recently. We can always, if we don't have Ableton, for instance, if we're running, FL Studio or Pro Tools or Reaper or whatever, Reason, whatever your DAW of choice might be, there are non-Max for Live versions of what we're going to look at here. So I would just recommend that you keep an open mind here, whether you're an Ableton user or not. So if we scroll down through the page, there's a number of different featured projects. Magenta Studio here is the first one. It still says beta, but the version that is currently downloadable is a 1.0 version. So nonetheless, be aware that it is still listed as beta, and that might cause certain weirdness, right? Max for Live can sometimes be a little bit unstable depending on the quality of programming of the actual devices that we're using. So this is going, I would say multiple levels of complexity deeper in terms of the interaction between the DAW, the computer CPU, the RAM, and all of these different apps that are running in different places potentially on the computer. That complicates things, and I would generally say, save often. If you have problems opening up after using Magenta Studio, you might have to move the Magenta Max file somewhere else in your computer, like out of the file that Ableton's looking for it in, so that it opens up beyond that. The nice thing here is that we can use this tool, generate a bunch of interesting things, use it in our creative process, and then remove it from the project and still keep all of the results of the process. So I would suggest maybe a best practice, what am I trying to say, would be to, load it in, do your work, and then just delete the device, because it might make things a little bit weird and unstable when trying to open and close projects. You also see a couple of other functions here, or projects here. The Nsynth we've used in live performance before. Really cool tool. In its popularized form, it's a hardware synthesizer that's also open source that you could build if you have all the hardware or a 3D printer and all this business. But it also exists as a Max for Live device, so you can make use of that synth. It, like any other synth, requires some coloring and some musical, maybe mixing and placement to make it sound, to really give it some life. But it's an amazing tool, really different, interesting things coming through this project, and it's open source, so if you want to, you can get involved and actually build things yourself. If you have some coding experience. If you don't, then you could learn, and then you can get in. And they have a bunch of new things. DrumBot was going around this week. It's kind of like a virtual drummer. There are some tools like this inside of the Magenta Studio we're going to look at today. So anyway, you can come in here. You can go to, let's click on the Magenta Studio, learn more. And notice here we have Ableton Live plugins. So they're next to it, standalone applications. We can click the appropriate one that we want. I'm going to get the Ableton Live plugins option here. We have our download buttons right at the top. So there you go. You can download it. And then once you've downloaded it, find the AMXD file. We'll just download it again here. Sure. Just save it there. Actually, we're not going to download it because that's going to take forever. But we can just download. We can literally drag it from right here onto a MIDI track. Okay, and that's what I've done. Boom, right there. I don't want to waste bandwidth downloading something I've already got and slow down the stream. This is me learning streaming as we go. Right. So we've got Magenta loaded up, and it's a big thing. It's if you noticed, it's at 880 megabytes. So when you load it into Ableton, it might take a second. So be ready to give it a moment and load up and have a sip of your coffee, like I just did, and then it'll be all loaded up. So then we have a few different modes when we load Magenta up. Continue, interpolate, generate, groove, and drumify. And each of these is going to perform a different algorithmic process on information that we put in or information that this device has already been trained on. So to make this plugin set, they created they have like a very specialized computer system, probably more than one, that they use to analyze information that they put into it. Surely, maybe we've all seen some of the Google Deep Dream and Deep Mind functions, and some of these devices where they're one of my favorites is training a machine learning algorithm on like horror movie scripts, and then it generates a horror movie script that's just some like abomination of comedic horror tropes. Just like the machine, it's like trying to it's really in my mind the equivalent of the old 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 typewriters, eventually turning something into something. And at the end of that process, someone has to sort through all of the typed out material and find something where it's actually making sense, right? But that's our job. So this is our collaborator. It's basically 1,000 monkeys playing 1,000 different instruments, or writing 1,000 Bach inventions or whatever it might be, and we try to pick the right one, or take what comes out of this and alter it perhaps drastically, right? Take it apart. We've got a lot of extra tools inside of Ableton that we can employ in this process. So this is again just like an input source of some information. Okay, so in this larger picture, this device is trained already, in a sense, right? They've already gone through the machine learning process of analyzing hours, thousands or millions of hours of content of, melodic patterns of the last 400 years, drum patterns from professional drummers playing drums, things of this nature, right? We're using tools that have already been trained what the parameter set might be, and then from that, it's going to look at what we're putting in. It might take pieces out of that. It will create new and interesting things, hopefully, as a result, or maybe terrible things, as we'll see. So let's start with this first option. I'm going to click on the continue option here, and I think, let's see, we should be able to actually send this out to the modular if we like, but maybe we're just like biting off more than we can chew if we're trying to do that. But okay, so in the meantime, let's go no output, and we'll just throw an instance of operator on here. All right, so now we're going to have, I've created a really dumb sequence up here, okay, and we've loaded the continue option. Now, one thing I would say would be we might want to get rid of these animated windows. I don't know how much CPU that's taking, but it might be too much. Okay, so continue has two modes. drums mode and melody mode. We're going to use melody mode for now. We'll come to a few different drum tools, but I would encourage you to try this out with drum beats. I think it's particularly interesting, and this set of tools is particularly interesting with melodic content, which of course we could turn into riffs, bass lines, whatever from that. But we're going to start at least with the melody options. So we select our mode, and then we choose an input clip, and we're going to choose this goofy clip that I've got up here. And again, in the chat room there, if you hear anything weird, anything doesn't work, please just let me know if anything sounds like it's like stopped or slowed or whatever, all that business. Okay, let's try this out. Okay, we're not in it for the sounds, right? We're in it for the notes right now. We'll worry about the sounds later. But we've got our pattern playing. Okay, we all can maybe remember that pattern now. So we choose the track that we want to focus on. We're going to choose the track that we're actually looking at the moment, track 1. We're going to choose the clip that we want to train this device on, right? Maybe that's the wrong terminology, because we're really not training it. We're using its training to analyze what we're sending in and then spit back out. So in theory, this should be kind of a trained composer or a player who could play back something, interpreted through their musical experience, except it's like this composer has experienced nothing else in life except for musical content. So it's kind of a savant and is going to generate some stuff that might have no bearing on reality or sense, depending on the settings that we set down below. So we're going to choose our variations. This is how many variations the device is going to generate right now. Let's just go for 8. Let's just keep it simple. Let's go for 5. And we're going to tell it how long we want the length of the continued material to be. Okay, we have a 2-bar pattern that we're starting with. Okay, 1, 2, and we're going to tell it. We're going to tell it that we want the continuation of this bit to be an additional 2 bars. So this device is going to take what we send in, the clip that we select. It's going to analyze that. It's going to analyze things like the scale, the pitches that are being used, what other pitches might, or maybe chord material might commonly make sense with those notes. And it's going to generate now an additional 2 bars, continuing this musical idea. We could think of this as a motif, right? Now it's creating variations, quite literally, on that motif. And it's telling us this is going to include the first 2 bars, and now the length of the continuation is going to be an additional 2 bars. And then we have a temperature control, and this kind of controls the level of cluelessness and carelessness, I'd say, of the player. Like, this is sort of on the lower side, the player may be playing things that make a little bit more sense, and maybe a sparser result, right? Maybe that's not a word. Is sparser a word? I don't know, a less busy result. On the other side, if we go above 1.0, we're going to get a busier, more hectic, I don't want to say chaotic or completely random, but it's going to sound like, we're going to be more tending to say, what the heck were they thinking with this side of things? Okay, so let's just take it at 1.0 for now. This should be kind of a, middle of the road, something sensible, I suppose. And we're going to hit the generate button. This is an offline device, so we send, we select some options to send into it. We give it a few settings. We push a button. It thinks about it for a second, and out the other side, values passed must be an array of numbers. Or wow, okay, never seen that error before. Let's just try this again. Now it seems like it's working. Is it gonna work? Did it crash? Ah, it did it. Never had that error before. But you see what I mean? It's in a beta state. still. So we have to be maybe a bit forgiving and willing to give it a couple chances here. So there we go. We got some results. Let's again listen to the original. Okay, that's the original. Here we're going to listen now to our variations. And the variations will likely, they should have, the original in the first 2 bars. And then the second 2 bars here will be the variation. Let's try it. Okay. Let's try another one here. Now we're talking. Click might help. I like that. There we go. It's a little bit more exciting. See, that's what I'm talking about. Now we've got too hard to hear down there. So now we've got 5 different variations. Of course, then we could come in, we could duplicate that loop and tweak this. Or hey, even maybe a cooler idea would be, let's say, okay, I liked, which one was it? That one, I think. Was it that one? No, I think it was, let's go with that one. I'm going to get rid of the other 4. Right? And then let's take this thing. Let's go back into continue. Still open. That window's still open. We'll choose now our resulting clip, and maybe we'll try it again. Let's just do 4 versions this time. Let's do a little bit busier result. So, oh shoot. See, I already made a mistake. We should have set the length to 4 bars now because we're analyzing a 4-bar clip, but that's okay. We're going to see what kind of result we get here. Will it work? Will it give us an error? I've never gotten an error message before. That was maybe because we're running Ableton and streaming and doing all this fun stuff. Okay, so here's now a 6-bar clip. Okay, see, you know, sometimes Magenta sounds like it's drunk. So maybe this is one of those times. Let's try this one. Kind of like that one. That one's pretty funky. Let's try that one more time. Let's tell it 4 bars. Okay, and now it's going to generate and out the other side. Now, while it's doing this, one thing to consider, I think, is that some of the other entities, organizations that are exploring the real-time machine learning and AI environment, including the AWS Deep Composer, claim to be doing real-time analysis and machine learning. Whether that's really happening is another question, or successfully happening is something to be determined. But there might be some other Magenta projects as well that are going to be doing this, but you'd have to dig through some of those. Let's try this now. You can see this is now a lot busier. Okay, yeah, really drunk. Okay, well, you know, you see where we're going here. These are all much busier than there's a number of strange things coming out of this as a result. But this is some of the fun of it, right? Now we might stumble in that process upon one bar of that generated continued material that we like more than some other bit. We might note that find that certain parts are cool, but they need a little bit of tweaking, right? Or maybe they need to be filtered through one of the MIDI effects, right? Effectively, if you're in the hardware modular world, quantized to a different scale, right? There's going to be a number of ways that we can start to take advantage of that resulting material, and it does result in very cool stuff sometimes. I've used it in my most recent track under as Computo, basically. But and we used it together on the Blessed Oscillator tracks that we've put out recently. So a lot of interesting things that we can do with this stuff, and it's really just becoming a jumping off point. Okay, so that's continue. And we're going to see that most of the other devices work the same way as continue in terms of picking some input material, right? A channel, a track, and a clip inside of that track, or maybe multiple clips, right? We're going to see a couple of permutations of these things, but then we'll see the resulting number of variations that we can generate, the length of those things, maybe some other parameters, and then the temperature control to go from more simple vanilla results to more busy, chaotic results on the opposite end of that spectrum. Okay. It was giving itself a solo, exactly. It's like it's the AI becoming more self-indulgent, right? Like, lay off AI, lay off Magenta. So if we come over here to Magenta Studio again, right? I've closed the continue button and or window, and so the button goes dark again. And now we'll go over to Interpolate. Okay. I'm going to pop that window up. It's going to take its sweet time, and then it's going to come up. All right. Here is another channel that I'm going to focus on this time. This is, again, another channel with operator. Up here, I've created two different bass lines. Let's shrink this down a little bit. Or actually, we can hide our input-output. That would make sense. Okay, so there we go. We've got two clips on channel 2. One up here in scene 1, one down here in scene 8. Okay, now the first one. Recognize that? You know that track?
I think so. Old house.
Yeah, exactly. Move Your Body. Right? Yeah. So that was number 1 on Beatport last week. Yeah, when I was putting this project together, I wanted to use some bass lines that would be simple, something that would be recognizable, something that would be, kind of maybe instantly, catch to our ear. And I figured, okay, Beatport Top 100 would be kind of like a really simple place to go, right? Like some simple bassline motifs and stuff. And number 1 was the recent remaster or edit or whatever of Move Your Body, classic house track. So I figured, okay, we got to use that one. Great, simple, funky little bass line there. The other one, I don't even know what track this is. I think it's a DJ Snake track or something like that. It's some other, Beatport Top 100 type of track.
Say Armin.
Jacko, is that your name? I hope. Jacko Grayshire in the comments is asking, do you have to give Magenta a song credit? It might be smart enough to sue you someday. That's, I think, a valid concern. Now, here's a problem. Will AI Magenta here write a pattern that is too close to someone else's pattern? Well, I guess I've kind of already broken that rule in that I'm admitting right now that these are bass lines kind of copied for educational purposes, U.S. government. But these are going to be some tools that we can start from, things that might be recognizable. We're going to use Interpolate to look at these two patterns and find algorithmic combinations of the musical material in these patterns. It's not just a matter of replacing notes necessarily. It's a matter of taking some of the information, the musical sequencing and rhythm, things like this, and applying some of those things in, again, potentially chaotic ways. But it's not exactly the same as just taking pieces and, copying them in and out. So here we go again. We can use Interpolate to do this process. Move. There we go. All right. We can do drums again, drum beats. Maybe we'll do that in our next channel here in a minute. But we're going to use this in melody mode because what is a bass line if not just a simple motif like melody, right? We're going to choose track 2. Recall that Magenta is not actually on track 2. We don't have to have it actually on the track we're affecting here. We're going to choose that first clip for clip A, second clip for clip B. We're going to tell it how many steps in between. Let's give it 6 steps. That is going to create 6 permutations in between these two clips, in between clips A and B. It's going to put them automatically down here on slots 9 through 14. We're just going to, highlight them and drag them up here. So visually we'll see that way that we're going from one extreme kind of like morphing slowly down into another extreme. So temperature, we'll just leave it 1.0 for now, and let's see what it does. Will we get other bass lines that are owned by other artists due to Magenta's otherwise cluelessness of legal sampling and not even sampling, but just musical quoting, melody stealing? I don't know. We'll see here. How many permutations of house bass lines are there? We're going to find out. So here's our original. This is the one of the classics. Here's a tweak. And not at all recognizably different. Some slight variation here. Okay. Now we're getting a little busier though. Okay, well, there we just answered a question, which is it just copying our A and B clips to the first and last clips in the resulting material? And the answer would be, I think, yes. Seemingly, they're the exact same clips. So I think maybe we might want to do this again with 8 clips. Then maybe we can dump the originals. But hey, look, we got some weird permutations in the process here. That one's a little lame, but maybe it's just because it's a little more bright. I think that's pretty cool. And, it's a starting point. It's not the finished product. It's just a little simple bass line. It's something that we can now repeat as a motif, tweak, cut out. That is a great point, Jacko. We could blame Magenta if we get sued. If we analyze a bunch of Marvin Gaye bass lines, and Magenta produces a Marvin Gaye bass line, Marvin Gaye style bass line, and then we get sued by the family of Marvin Gaye. Can we blame it on Magenta? I don't think that's going to work out. I think I, I don't think that the courts are going to look favorably on us in that process. They're going to look for someone to blame, someone with money. Now, hey, Google has a lot more money than us, but I just tend to think that might not be a likely result.
What's even more is that's we're talking about right now. So if we jump forward a decade from now, there's a high possibility that this AI machine learning will take over the judges and doctors and lawyers.
Oh yeah, right. And then we're
Right.
being judged by
And
the very person, the very entity that we'd like to push off responsibility onto. That's a great point.
And at this point, the AI judge may say, no, it's all good because that was my AI brother that did it. So,
Yeah, exactly. And
so
you think you think there's
Slippery
insider dealing in the legal field now. Just wait till they're all connected by wires and
doctors and all that, it's going to be a computer.
be afraid, I guess. Yeah, so I think we still do have to work, operate with an abundance of caution. This is why we play our work for other people, so that, hopefully other people who have heard other things can catch our work and say, hey, that bass line sounds a lot like XYZ, and maybe we are left to consider, do we want that to be the case? Do we need to make some changes to avoid potential problems in the long run? And yeah. Anyway, great thought experiments, I think, here. Ones that are certainly questions that are not going to be answered here, unfortunately. But all right, let's try this again on some drums real quick. I got this, this 808. No, it's 909. It's not an 808. It says right there. It's a 909 kit. And I've got a couple of beats on this track. Let's. Yeah, in your face. Okay, there's one beat. Okay, and just to give some full honesty here, these were recorded from Instant House, the Max for Live device that does our some nice, quick and dirty drum sampling or drum sequencing for us. Excuse me, not sampling. So we've got these two beats. One is like maybe a house beat. One is maybe more of like a breaks type of beat. Okay, we're gonna switch back to drums, not melody. We're gonna choose now track 3, the 909 kit track. We're going to choose our two extremes here. We're going to tell it, give us 8 permutations this time, because number 1 and number 8 are going to be copies of our A and B clips here. And let's go like 1.1. This is a little busier, a little different. Hopefully not too chaotic. Let's find out. Now, the drums functions in drum programming, the drum pattern analysis functions inside of Magenta were trained on real drummers, popular drummers. I'm sure just like the melodic content, that includes a lot of different types of drums and music. But I think they're going for sensitivity. They're going for realism here. They're trying to create something that could pass for a realistic result. And we'll hear that in a minute on a more realistic drum kit. But on a 909, some of that sensitivity might be something that we might not always want, right? We want some brutality, I think, from a drum machine, as opposed to a real drum kit, and the use case is totally different. So here's the original again. Pretty straightforward. Yeah. All right. So, I think a little bit of groove might help. Right now, we're, especially with Interpolate, because the patterns that we're working with are mostly, um, there's a little bit of velocity sensitivity in there, I suppose, but all of the resulting patterns seem to be pretty flat sensitivity. So maybe this is the interpolate function might be a little bit more friendly, it seems, for the drum machine environment, right? So interpolate, a little bit different than continue. Here we're using two source sort of source patterns, and we're finding interesting combinations and middle ground in between those patterns, as opposed to continue, which takes a motif. I suppose we could send in a much longer musical idea, though that might not be advisable. It might take extra long to start actually producing some material. But we can take those short motifs and we can generate variations on those motifs. Okay, so let's go over to the battery channel now. And battery, oh yeah, okay, I think I was doing the same thing on battery here, but maybe with some more out there sounds, more glitchy type of sounds. Drum sound doubled up, huh? Let's see. That might be, that's weird. It might be the audio coming through the system. I can't explain that, but let me know if you're still hearing that. I might have to catch that on the flip side here. Let's try the generate option. And of course, we could just maybe try some of these clips in the middle. I think I was using the same actual beats here. Tell me if that sounds a little bit better. Okay, so now we got some business here. Okay, now we're going to generate 4 bars. Okay, this is going to generate beats on the drum sides, melody content, melodic content on the melody side. Let's try drums. We'll aim for track 5, this drum machine here. Let's turn it on, and then we will tell it, just put it in slot 1. It's going to put 8 variations starting on slot 1, and we can set the temperature. Let's just see what it gives right now. And this is purely based off of the training, right? We're not using any kind of influencing material right now. We're not continuing anything. We're not interpolating between patterns. This is just Magenta being told, fart something out. And here it comes, okay? Yeah, Okay, hopefully you guys can still hear that. Let me know if all of a sudden the drums are gone, but now hopefully they're not flanged anymore. Okay, so we got some beats. Oh, we got 2 beats going here. Let's turn this one off. And we got instant house going on this one. Super fail. There we go. Sounded good altogether, actually. Okay, here's the first one again. Kind of like weird place for a drum fill, right? Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. You're saving my stream here. Okay, so here we go. We got 8 different. Oh, this is weird. You know, hey, maybe with less cymbals. Yeah, now we're talking. Turn that up to like 160, like instant footwork. There we go. So this is super boring one with some just like dead space, you know, like just giving up midway through the beat. That's a pretty funky one. Let's listen to that one with the metronome. So we got some, you know, kind of almost polymetric feeling rhythms out of this one. This is where, you know, we might say, hey, you know, now we're really feeling like this person is either not playing with the beat, or they're playing some, you know, regional rhythm structure that that might not fit with, like, you know, your house or, you know, pop music type of vibe, but actually pretty funky, especially if we maybe rearrange, like, what if we moved like the kick drum pattern over? It's the snare pattern that's so funky, right? It feels so like these overlapping patterns, which is very cool and different. And again, like, that seems pretty, like, you know, vanilla hitting on the beat, but you notice these are all the offbeat. A little bit funky. So, you know, again, like these devices are not always going to be like really right on the money like we expect. So, all right, so generate 4 bars. Let's try this on the melodic side now. And we're going to go to, let's go back to one of these earlier tracks. We'll get rid of some of these cuts here, and then let's say output location 2, start at clip 1, and then we're going to do 8 variations. Let's do a cool temperature this time. This might be too cool. It might result in very few notes per bar, but we can always go the other way. Yeah, so here we go. 4 bar clip now. Here's the first one, and we will stop everything else. simple, but it could be a riff. Again, very simple. You know, now you're not even trying. Bass lines. Right, we can see this is like keeping it simple. Okay, very simple results. Let's try that again. We could keep those. We could send these to a different clip slot, but let's try something much busier now. All right, sorry about the lag. If you're getting some lag, oh shit, we just generated already. We're generating on top of the generated processes. This might be, okay, I think it just made new ones. Now we're talking. You know, let's maybe put that on like more of the square wave side of things or something. You know, we got some instant acid going on here. Yeah, all right, now we're talking. Little tweaking. You know, we're just tweaking what comes out of this thing, which might be imperfect, might not exactly meet our expectations, but we're talking about some input, right? Material that we can then go back, tweak, you know, cut pieces out of this thing, right? What if we take a piece of this? What if we crop it? What if we, whoops, what am I doing? What if we come back to Magenta? Now I'm breaking things. Okay, no, don't close. Okay, come back to Magenta. We do the continue function now. And we tell it to now continue this piece, right? Yeah, those square waves, you know, it's hard to mess with a square wave, you know? All right, so let's try melodic continue. We're going to go operator channel 2, generate 3/8. It's going to put this on output 4 clips to clip slots 4 through 7. That's fine. Let's give it, yeah, 2 bars is fine, and we'll go a little bit busier. Let's see what comes with this. So we're going to make 4 more clips. It's going to put them right below the clip that we've chosen, 3/8 generate here, and let's see. It's going to fart something out now. Come on. Did it do it? Oh, maybe it already did it. No, it's only supposed to do 2 bar clips. Okay, we're going to take these other ones. We're going to get rid of them. Let's try this one more time. Shouldn't be too tough to do this. There's not that much information we're trying to generate. So, especially compared to some of these other ones we've done. And there we go. Okay, now look, I messed it up again. Should have done 1 bar, because that's what Continue really wanted. Didn't want, or I wanted 1 additional bar. But there we go. Some slight permutations of those things, and you know, we're doing a recursive generative process now. We're creating something in one device. We're cutting that thing down. We're editing that thing. Then we're sending it through another one of these devices, and the result is maybe something that we wouldn't have written, but might be different and cool, and might also just be complete garbage. But you know what? That's how this process goes, and we have to be willing to go through it and indulge the process, or else we never discover those happy accidents, those things that can come from this process. Okay, so there are 2 additional modes, Groove and Drumify. So let's bring up the Groove, and these are going to, I think, be a lot more interesting on realistic drums. Okay, you know, we could still, of course, use these on anything, but and especially if we're sending this out to, say, a drum machine or a modular synthesizer with drum patches, some drum modules, whatever it might be. There might be some interest in terms of, you know, we might only be sending certain types of signals. We might not be even sending velocity information, or we might be able to map velocity information to do other things aside from just perceived volume control on different drum hits. But we're going to basically take a beat now. Let's find a beat here. This is, I think, one of those same ones that we were using a minute ago. Yeah, let's try this out. Let's turn all these other things off, and I'm so glad you found us in your YouTube hole. You know, I know what a black hole YouTube can be, and I'm frankly impressed that they would serve this video up. So thank you for joining us and checking this thing out. So, and you know, since you came in a little bit late, I think feel free. This is going to be up later. Go back and watch the rest of it, the intro bit, because that, you know, you might have missed a couple of these modes. Okay, so Drumify is going to take this thing, which is maybe, actually, let's even take a less velocity sensitive bit. Okay, whatever, this is fine. We're going to take this bit, and notice it's very rigid. It's very to the timeline. It's very cut to the, let's say, the quantized grid, right? Everything is snapped right to the 16th note grid. Groove, is that what we're working with now? Groove, yeah. Groove will analyze this bit, and using the functions that have been machine learned from, right? Using the grooves, the drum performances, I think a lot of it was actually done with professional drummers on MIDI drums, so they could capture their real drum patterns, and in this case, groove, right? Their feel. So we're going to use that machine learned information now to apply feel to these patterns that we're going to select. So I'm going to select this first kind of like sad breaks pattern, and we're going to tell this thing, let's just move a couple of these things out of the way, generate a pattern based on that, and we can turn up the busyness and all this business. So let's just set it to 1.0 for now. Let's try it. And Ah, another error. Interesting. This is what happens when you, again, live stream, do Magenta, do Ableton, and all these things. Okay, well, let's try this. Let's, one more time. Let's see. This is interesting. No, doesn't want to do it. Let's try reopening that window. This is life with Max or Max for Live. Sometimes, you know, this is like hand coded stuff. I mean, everything's hand coded, I suppose, but the process is a finicky one, and little inconsistencies somewhere in the larger system could mess with some of these things. Let's see if it works this time. Groove it up. It did it. See? When in doubt, delete and undo. Old Ableton standby. Okay, so it took that beat, which was, if you recall, very rigid. Actually moved the first kick drum a little bit too far over before the beat, I think. You can see these are no longer on the grid. Everything's been nudged around a little bit. There's a bit more variation in the velocity sensitivity of the pattern as well, right? If we look at this pattern, it's either, you know, each instrument basically has, each note has its own velocity. Oh, I guess there's a little bit of velocity sensitivity in there, but it's like the extremes. There's no like variation in that velocity aside from the high or low values. So with this one though, a lot more variation in the velocity performance, a lot more groove and feel in terms of the timing placement of the notes. And it's not just like everything has been nudged ahead or behind the beat. There's different amounts, right? If we zoom in on some of these, we're going to see that, okay, this is very slightly ahead of the beat. This one is well behind. This one isn't quite as far behind. So there's like some specificity here. It's not based on any one particular person's drumming technique. It's based on learned information from many, many, many techniques. Let's try this at a higher temperature here. Let's see what it does now. Yes, overwrite that clip. Thank you for asking. And again, nudge this thing a little bit too far. Not noticing that much of a difference, though it seems like now there's less consistency between the timing of the adjusted notes, right? A little bit looser results, maybe. That's at a higher temperature. Maybe if we go closer to the other side, then the grooves will be, or the amount of adjustment of the timing of each of the notes will be less noticeable. So that's groove. Another way to kind of manipulate our groove and swing feels, right? Again, this is something that will probably be more exciting with real drum sounds, maybe like real percussion ensembles even, you know, like it doesn't have to just be one drum kit. It could be an ensemble of percussionists. We could use, you know, one of these crazy contact libraries like Action Strikes or something like that, where we get a whole ensemble of drummers playing and reacting to this maybe more variable musical material. Okay, last one is Drumify, and Drumify is going to kind of do a few of these things at a time. Basically, it's going to do some timing, some velocity manipulation. I think it's going to do some generation. Let's look at the window and find out. Okay, so, or maybe Drumify we use with melodies. Let's try it out. Let's take a kit or a beat. We'll just use that first beat again. And here, we'll move this thing down out of the way. Okay, we're going to drumify a drum beat. These are maybe the less thrilling ones, the groove and drumify for me. Though I mean, as a drummer, I do kind of find it interesting that there are some of these functions available. But at the same time, if I want a loose feel, I could play it myself. But okay, and that came from. And again, notice there are some very slight, inconsistent timing details, some velocity, some additional complication to the actual pattern. Subtle differences. That's, kind of what we were going for in that particular setup. Did I just close that window again? That was dumb. Okay, so we'll try this one more time, maybe with a busier outlook here. And maybe we'll do it also, we could, let's try influencing it with a non-drum pattern. Let's do one more drum pattern here, the busier result. Let's bring this thing down again. Should be much busier now. Still generating. Will it do it? Will everything else on my computer crash in the process? These things are all possible and all going through the back of my head every minute of this entire hour-long stream. So there it goes. I think because we chose a busier result, the higher temperature, it's going to have to process harder. So let's try it. Not all that busier than the other one. Still misses the first beat because it moved that a little ahead there. I suppose it's definitely busier. A lot of ghost notes, right? The accents are still pretty solid, right? Where those accented beats are in the original, they're still pretty present. There's a little bit of differentiation here in the second bar, but most of the accents are still there, especially the 2 and the 4. But there's busier pattern, a lot more ghost notes, a lot more sensitivity that with if we put this on a drum machine, might not seem nearly as exciting. It might seem like we're losing a little bit of intensity by having too much velocity motion in that process. So, this is one of those things that I think is maybe a little bit more applicable for real drums. Let's try training this thing on one of our melodies. Let's go back to that channel 2 melody 3/8. That was this thing. Okay, and we'll stop this other beat. Okay, so it's that. We're going to now train this towards that. And I'll put it 1.3. Let's see what we get. Sure, overwrite that other clip. I mean, it's trying to make a beat that jives with that melody, right? So with a drum beat, we're going to get kind of a variation on that drum beat. With a melody, I think this is really the true intention of Drumify. Melody, a beat, a bass line, or not a beat, a bass line, a riff, chord progression, something like this. Then probably with a little bit more rhythm would be ideal. A chord progression, just playing block, whole note chords might not be much for Drumify to go on, but something to try, something to experiment with, and I'm going to leave that to you guys to experiment with, because this is This has gone on long enough.
Mhm.
Okay. So, yeah, Magenta. I would suggest you check it out. Go to magenta.tensorflow.org. Try this stuff out. Download it. If you've never used Max for Live devices before, this might be a great test. Might be a great opportunity to go through the motions and see what you can get. So,
Yeah, it's a good one.
yeah. Any additional thoughts? Give us some feedback. Any Q&A, questions, problems, complaints, things that we should fix, things that we should write in an angry email to Google or the Magenta team. Give us some thoughts. Any thoughts? Any Q&A? I think maybe we will leave it at that. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for the input and the help with the stream, letting us know when our volume is up and down. And next week, or actually, wait, I think Monday we might be doing a special show. So keep an eye out for another posted live stream. That will be Monday at noon again. If it all falls through, then I'm just not going to say anything about it, and I don't even want to say too much about it now because I don't want to ruin anyone's expectations. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we will have that on Monday at noon. Keep an eye out for the live stream posting. If so, it will be a true blast. I think we'll be having some guests in the studio. So, all right. Thank you guys very, very much. One should be able to choose the key in the Magenta tools. Well, the key is effectively influenced by the pattern that you tell it to go from, right? If we're using the continue or the interpolate function, it's basing that off of what it analyzes to be the root note of that pattern, right? It tries to figure out what the scale and these things are. The generate functions, though, for those, like any pattern that might be, kind of created in a vacuum, as opposed to in the grander scheme of another track, pre-existing elements, we might need to transpose, right? We might need to use the other MIDI tools in the MIDI effects in the DAW to transpose, to scale, to maybe in other ways perform the resulting material, and that I think is certainly a consideration, right? The resulting material might not generally fit with whatever the rest of our composition is if we're just purely generating that stuff. So if that is the case, we might need to consider what is the root note, what does it sound like the root note is of this generated pattern, right? We might need to use a keyboard or watch the piano roll and try to identify and analyze, where does it keep coming back to? What does it sound like is the root note? Then we might need to use like the pitch MIDI effect or something to transpose the whole thing up or down. Or of course we could just highlight the notes and use our arrow keys or, things like that. I find myself doing that a lot because a lot of the generated material is in the mid to high frequency range with the intention of it being melodic content as opposed to a bass line, which it could just as easily be a bass line if we move it down a couple of octaves. So I often find myself having to move around the notes that are generated into a clip. Again, remember, it's just raw material. It's really up to you how to use it and to try to take it into some other place because Magenta is an otherwise, blithering idiot aside from its otherwise deep awareness of music. It's unaware of all other things, including social graces or maybe how to use those musical ideas that come spewing out. So we have to filter it. I think of it like an artist who's coming into the studio. Maybe think of it like a 5-year-old who, their parent was like, "Oh, my kid wrote some songs. Can you help produce them?" right? And we are working with basically like a 2-bar motif or something like this, as opposed to a fully formed human songwriter. We're dealing with somebody who's trying to basically force us to finish the process of a very basic idea, and this is kind of what we're dealing with in terms of what comes out of Magenta. So we have to be willing to engage in that and tweak it and throw out the trash and grab the gold bits and buff and shine and tweak and alter those things. So it is a process of a little bit of shaping the results, but